now going to go through the course of the Korean War, kind of like what happens. You might get a little bit of a question on this. This is really important for what happens later on. So try and think about how this might impact what happens later on. Alright? Korea, Munich influences what happens the United States going into Korea. Second World War influences going into Korea. What happens in Korea will influence what the Americans do in Vietnam. Alright? And what happens in Cuba will also influence what the Americans do in Vietnam. So this is kind of like they're learning as they go along, or unlearning, if you like. So the second bit is, of course, of the Korean War. And here we go. This is the first bit. Alright? So this is phase one. Alright? And you need to have a brief outline of this. You might get a question which says, describe the Korean War. Alright? So let's look at this to see what's happened. Okay? So we've now got, this is from July to September 1950. We've now got the United Nations are saying it's going to intervene. Can they get there? Can they get there in time to stop the North Koreans invading? The North Koreans have pushed over the border, they've captured Seoul, they're winning the war. The South Koreans aren't able to hold on. The Americans have some occupation troops in Japan, alright, following on World War II. So they send the US Army across from Japan to South Korea to try and stop the North Koreans. They don't. Alright, and soon the South Koreans and the Americans are in full retreat. And by September of 1950, all of Korea, that bit there that's in yellow, is all North Korea. That's what they've captured. The only bit there in light blue around Busan, alright, that little circle is all that's left of South Korea. That perimeter is all that's left of South Korea. That's all what the Americans have to defend. Yeah, sure. Do you want the light off as well? Does the light off help? Will the light off help? Poor side has been left.
You okay? Yeah. Can you see?
So she can't, of course she can't see. Alright? So this is the first bit of like what's called the Korean seesaw. So it goes down. So what you need to know from this is that at the start the North Koreans were winning. Alright, and they come actually very close. If they capture this little box, then happy days. They've won. Alright, but the Americans come up with a cunning plan. They have a general called General MacArthur, who World War II, meh.
Did he get fired?
He will do, yes. Old soldiers never die. They just fade away. Is what he said after he got fired. But he comes up with a plan. What would be your plan now? How are you going to stop this? What are you going to do? Any military strategists? Anybody can remember what he does? It's a great plan. It's a brilliant plan. One of the all-time great military plans. Yeah.
Doesn't he do some military plan amphibian?
Yes.
Yeah.
What does amphibian mean? He turns into a frog? No. What does he do?
The water and land.
Yeah. So where does he go?
Does he use to their advantage to attack from there?
I don't know what that means.
The fact that Korea is a.
Miss Chandama has allowed me to stay here till the person is my turn.
No, there's no problem. It's all videoed. It's all recorded.
Does he use the fact that Korea is a nearby the sea country to invade from there?
He does invade by the sea, alright? And he comes up with this kind of plan, which is phase number 2, which is he goes to Incheon. Alright, so Incheon's right up here on the border, next to Seoul. Because Seoul's the capital, so he wants to get to Seoul as quickly as possible. So he comes up with a massive counterattack, led by the United States and the British navies, because they're strong at sea, right? They've got the biggest sea power. They control the sea. The air's 50-50. So they attack the North Koreans from behind. So suddenly the North Koreans are in massive problems, all right, because their supplies can be cut off. And now the North Koreans are caught in a massive pincer movement. They've been attacked from behind. Incheon, Seoul is liberated, and then from Busan, the American South Koreans break out. The North Korean army is just in full retreat. Okay. By the 1st of October.
No. The fact that this attack was a success, is it because North Korea was not attentive to the how much more
But
they
yeah, certainly
got
for a little bit.
also?
Yeah, they put all their eggs in one basket. They didn't realise this would be the Americans would have this capability to be able to. Americans and the British, but they would have the capability to do it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And the Americans were very good at distracting them. Look over here, look over here. Oh no, we're losing. Oh no, we're building up, building up, building up. Bang. Yeah. So it's a great plan. So 15th of September they land. 15th September has 30 days, doesn't it? Yeah. So 15th of September. So 2 weeks later, by the 1st of October, every single North Korean soldier is out of South Korea. They've either been killed, they're either captured, or they've run away. Okay, so this is a brilliant military tech. It took them like 4 weeks, 3 months or whatever to get down south. North Korea's in full retreat. Now we have a question. Dun, 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 dun. Is containment enough? Because containment's one. Well, hey, we've contained. We've pushed you back to the 38th parallel. We've done it. But we can roll them back now. They're in full retreat. Their army's dead. Their army's destroyed. There's no North Korean army left. They might be able to get some more, but it's not going to be enough to beat the entire world. So, do we stop at the border of the 38th parallel, or do we double our money and go for rollback? What do? They go for rollback. They cross the 38th parallel. This is an argument you can have either side, all right? If they stay there, they stay there. But they have a great opportunity. All right, so what they do, phase 3, they push back. They push all the way up the border of North Korea. All right, they cross the border. This is a step that's more than just a military step. It means that we're no longer just containing communism from spreading. We're now looking to roll it back. That's to remove it altogether. Now there's one country in particular that really gets annoyed by this and is starting to freak out. Which country, which borders North Korea, is starting to freak out? China. Mao's China is saying, don't go near the river. The river is the border, the Yellow River. They're like, don't go near the river, don't go near the river. That's our river, we don't want you there. All right, because for the Chinese perspective, from the communist Chinese perspective, they would have a massive American army on their border. They've only just finished their civil war. In Taiwan, they've got the nationalist army, the Kuomintang army, who's ready to come back. They're like, no, we don't want this. One of the reasons North Korea still exists today is the Chinese like it because it's like a buffer. Remember we talked about buffer states? Yeah, North Korea is a buffer, so China doesn't have American soldiers on its border, which it does not want. Alright? So, we've had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to kick them out of South Korea. 2 weeks later, as we get to the 15th of November, up to the 24th of November, the UN counteroffensive gets very, very close to the border, and the Chinese saying, stop it, don't do this. So eventually in November, we have the biggest defeat in US military history. Alright, they are absolutely overwhelmed by the Chinese. They are at the end of their supply lines. They're not reinforced, they're just rocking forward, they're not expecting anything. They're like, yeah, happy days, it's really going to be really nice. And then 1.5 million Chinese come across the border and they attack in overwhelming numbers. The Americans, the United Nations has the technology, but the Chinese have the numbers and the experience as well, because we just fought the Chinese Civil War. They cross the 38th parallel. They start going into South Korea. Goodness me, we're almost into South Korea again. What's going on here? But they've overstretched their supply lines. The Americans have dominance in the air and sea. And then we have the question, we push them back. So the final phase 4, from January 1945, 51, everybody pushes them back.
so sorry to disturb, but we need Myra for the measurements.
No worries.
Thanks.
So the United Nations pushes back the communists, and they get to a ceasefire line in July 1951, which is pretty much exactly where we started. And there the war will stay for 2 years. MacArthur, this is where your man gets fired. He's like, dudes, look what we've got in our locker. What have we got in our locker that we should use? The bomb. Let's nuke them. Alright, let's nuke them. Let's nuke their supply lines. Let's nuke Chinese cities. They've attacked us. We can attack them. If we bomb the bridges, if we bomb their supply corridors, if we bomb their main cities in Manchuria, we just nuke them. Let's do it, people. We can win. Truman's like, no, I don't want to do that. Do you not realise, one, everybody's going to think we're like the baddies. Alright, everybody's going to think like, hey, that's a bit harsh. And secondly, it might provoke the Soviet Union to get involved. Alright, because up in the corner is also with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is also involved. It's kept hidden at the time, but the North Korean Air Force largely consists of Russian pilots. So this is probably the major time, if not the only time, where American Air Force and Soviet air fighters are fighting each other. Alright, over the skies of Korea. And so that's why MacArthur gets fired. There's a meeting, I think they meet in Hawaii, Honolulu or something, and Truman's like, no, jog on, you're not going to do that. Okay? So, we're back where we started. Key question though is nothing happens for 2 years. It's stalemate. It's kind of like World War One all over again. Alright? So this is quite embarrassing. This is why in the United States they don't talk about Korea. Talk about Vietnam, don't talk about Korea, because it's kind of like the forgotten war, because it's kind of embarrassing. It won't be until 1953 that there's a ceasefire. And the main reason is, well, let's see what. The main reason is Stalin. Stalin wants the war to continue for as long as possible. Why does he want the war to carry on as much as possible? Because this gives him, because this means that the United States is less likely to intervene anywhere else. It's already fighting in Korea. Is he going to fight over Berlin? Probably not. Is he going to fight over somewhere else? Probably not. It ties down the Americans. The Americans are occupied getting involved in Korea. That means they're less likely to challenge the Soviet Union elsewhere in the world. That's reason number one. Number two is it also ties down China. Alright, China is the biggest communist country now. It defers to Russia because Stalin's the daddy of communism. Alright, but if China eventually gets its stuff together, China will be bigger and more powerful than Russia. So why don't we just keep the Chinese tied down in fighting a forever war while we supply them with weapons and stuff? Therefore, Stalin can leverage the Chinese to do what he wanted. Second, other reasons. Truman not prepared to use atomic weapons, as we've said. But we've said, this is what he was going to do. But this is really their only chance of breaking through Chinese lines. Chinese have got such a numerical superiority. One thing to say for Truman in this, Truman obviously sometimes gets the blame for being like a warmonger, the only person in human history ever to authorize an atomic attack on cities. Who were boo bad man. Right, and we can see the impacts of that on him here, because here he becomes the first ever leader not to use a big powerful weapon that they have that nobody else has, really. He doesn't do it. Anywhere else in history, you have a new weapon of great destruction, it's used straight away. You know, Germans get rockets, we're going to use that. Germans get gas, we're going to use that. British get tanks, we're going to use that. This is the first time in human history where you have a weapon of great power that could win you a conflict that is not used. So yeah, we can go boo boo, Truman, you warmonger, bombing people with atomic weapons, but also you have to go, well, yay, you didn't use them. And this sets the precedent of like not really using them. He also sets another precedent by MacArthur, because before this it's a military decision to use nuclear weapons. And Truman's like, yeah, MacArthur, I don't want you to have that choice. If you're going to use nuclear weapons, it's the president that decides. Alright? So which of these is going to be the most important, why there's not a breakthrough? Well, in 1952 we have 52, 53, we have, actually 53, we have new leaders. So, 44, 48, 52, election, Eisenhower becomes president. As a military specialist, leading general of World War II, alright, he says, I'm going to end the Korean War, I know what I'm going to be doing. More importantly, and consider the timing of this, let's just say July 1952. Oh, sorry, the armistice was signed in July of 1953. Stalin died in March 1953. Right? As soon as Stalin dies, we get an armistice. The person keeping this war going is Stalin. Alright, it's Stalin. So after his death in March, just a few months later, we get a ceasefire and armistice, which continues to this day. Technically, legally, both countries are still at war with each other. Technically, legally, the United Nations is still at war with North Korea because there's not been a peace treaty signed. There is an armistice line between the two. They walk up and down it every day. They sometimes send over like leaflets to each other. Sometimes a North Korean soldier will try and run across the border. Sometimes an American soldier will try and run across the border. But it's a big demilitarized zone between the two countries. It's one of the most heavily armed, probably the most heavily armed border in the entire world between the two. Alright, that exists to this day. So, that's the maps. Don't really need to explain those maps, that would be quite tedious. So there we go, that's the Korean War. Everything about the Korean War. Maya, as Korean skeptic, Korean phobe. Any questions about Korea? No? Happy? Yeah? Main questions you're going to get about Korea would be, why did the Americans get involved? Why did the United Nations get involved? Would be, why did the Korean War happen? Why did North Korea happen? And you would get it as, why did it last so long? So only 3 questions you can get. Okay? Wow, we've gone through that very quickly. Let's do it. 3 20-minute lessons. Look at this. Shall we do a